Good morning, everybody. My name is Rachel, and you've joined us with the PatternFly team for our PatternFly demo. And I'll be posting this video after we go through our demo today on the YouTube channel. So feel free to send that out to anyone you think would be interested. If you have any deeper questions for today about our demo, feel free to head to our forum, which is linked in the demo agenda, and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. I'll also try to leave time for questions today. And we'll go ahead and get started on our interaction design docs, and Matt Carano is going to present Wizard.
Thanks, Rachel. I am going to, I've been working on documenting design guidelines for usage of the Wizard pattern, and so let me share my screen out, do a quick tour of that. Let's see, Wizards. Okay, so the PatternFly and these designs were presented earlier, but so hopefully they're familiar to most of you by now. But the basic Wizard pattern that we're using is we're placing the steps along in a left-hand sidebar. This allows for more flexibility, more extensibility, and better responsiveness when we are moving from desktop to mobile. So the simple Wizard just has a simple list of steps on the left, and body and buttons along the bottom to control the flow of the Wizard. We can also add sub-steps to any step. So in this case, let me zoom this up a little bit so it's a little bit easier for folks to see. Okay, so in this case, the second step configuration has 3 sub-steps. So those display nested below the main step. There should always be a review step at the end that allows you to confirm your changes. The next button changes to a finish button at that point, or it can be either finish or anything that's more specific for what you're doing, like create VM or something like that, for example. Once the process is launched, we show a progress screen, and then at the completion, we're recommending to post some type of a completion screen, which is built on top of the empty state pattern. There's also a progressive Wizard option, and this supports a case where all the steps are not known. So some of the steps are known. The steps are exposed as we move through this. So, for example, the first step here, the user is presented with an option. What do you want to do? Create a new thing, update an existing thing. Going to the next screen, they've selected to create something new, so they get again a set of options either for quick create or custom create, and in this case they're selecting quick create, and at that point the remaining steps can be exposed because so if they went back and changed their selections, either step 1 or step 2, that would expose a different set of steps here in the left-hand sidebar. And then this is the mobile version of this, where the steps menu gets hidden but can be exposed through a drop-down that overlays the body of the Wizard. That's about it. Any questions about that? Okay.
Hold on one second. I did. Yeah, go ahead. I see that the next button is on the left, which I do find it maybe just a bit weird because the whole reading flow is left to right. Do you think it's I don't know if you checked it out or what do you think about it?
Yeah, we had a discussion of this about 3 weeks ago, and within the PatternFly team, with myself, the visual designers, the developers, and we made a decision for all of our screens, whether they be forms embedded in pages, modals, to left align the action button. So the primary action is always aligned to the left. And the main reason we did this was to have a consistent approach across all of our patterns. Because previously, in some cases, we had buttons aligned on the right, some cases we had buttons aligned on the left, and we found there was a lot of confusion from people about what they should do. So we felt like converging around the simple approach. The other advantage of this is we could take this wizard. Right now, this wizard is being shown in the modal, but we could do the same version of the wizard and embed this in a page, and we wouldn't have to have alternate placements of the buttons. So that was basically the thinking behind that decision. But it is a change from what we had done in PatternFly 3.
Yeah, okay, thanks for cleaning that up.
Okay, thanks for the question.
And I just had one more question to everyone here on the call about the wizard. There is some things that were brought to our attention regarding the wizard of improvements that we could be making. One of them is to shave down the width of that steps bar on the left there. And so that could potentially be a breaking change, dependent on how we approach it. And we're just trying to be very cautious about breaking changes. So the question is to see if anyone is currently using this wizard. And if you are, I would love just to hear that in the chat, if you could identify that there so that we can work with the people that are using this to figure out exactly the technical approach and how that impacts people using it. Thank you.
Okay, so the link to this document is in the agenda, so you are all welcome to, if you want to review this in more detail and provide any feedback on the specific guidelines, I certainly welcome that, and we hope to be getting this up on the new PatternFly website probably within the next week or two. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Matt. And those of you who had questions. And Gina's going to cover charts, part 1 being usage, and part 2 our color system.
Thanks, Rachel. First, I just want to apologize ahead of time in case you hear barking in the background because my dogs are being crazy right now. So I've been working on documentation for charts. This part 2 is mostly just about usage, and it breaks it down into types of charts. And so I guess mostly you're welcome to read through this, but the thing I wanted to bring up was donut charts, because we got a comment that we need ones for thresholds. So I'm going to present that later on with my ideas. But for now, we're going to go with this in the meantime. And I'm in progress of creating markdown files for it too. And then this part 2 is the color system. And Michael helped me out a lot with this, and basically just tried to wrap my head around how the system worked, and I split it up. So the beginning just talks about all of the colors that we'll have in the system. And these, obviously, with the changes that we just made in PatternFly 4, this will probably change, but for now, we'll just go with that. We added some animations to help explain how it works and broke it down so that it applies more of like how many variables that you're dealing with rather than, I guess that was just the easiest way to do it. And then, so this will live in our styles pages on the site instead of the documentation that lives on the site now. So it will just be in styles rather than with the rest of the documentation. And that's all.
Great, thank you, Gina. Any questions? All right, so Michael has several things to share with us today in CSS.
Hey, I'll share my screen. Okay, this is just a list of enhancements. The first couple of enhancements are on the wizard. We added a finish state for the wizard that hides the footer and the navigation. This is where you would put your finished configuration and process type messaging, and then after this you could have an actual finished or completion page that's void of the navigation and the footer. Then the next enhancement was a full height and full width modifier. By default, the wizard's contained in a reasonable width and height based off of just an average viewport size, but you can now modify the wizard so that it will just go with the height and width of the browser. The next enhancement was in the select component. We added a selected state, so it's just this visual with a check mark. The next was in our page component. We added a container for your breadcrumb navigation, and you can see that here. And the next was also in the page component. Previously, you can have multiple sections in the main content area of the page, and by default, the last section will grow to fill the available height of the main content if the content doesn't exceed the height of the viewport. Well, now you can specify which section you want to grow and any sections that you don't want to grow. So you could have, for example, the middle section grow and the last section to not grow. And that's it.
Thanks, Michael. Any questions? All right, and Christy has several updates to share with us as well. We have data list, refactoring, card demo, and fixing expanded toggle on table.
Hey everyone. This sprint, probably the biggest thing was the data list refactor. And this was a big breaking change because the data list was currently breaking. It couldn't handle more than 2 columns of content. And so we wanted to update the data list to be more flexible and supportive. And also we didn't have designs for the data list on mobile, so this is a good chance for us to sync with design about what they wanted. So the first thing was, so data list cells by default use PFM grow, or they use flex grow, which allows them to fill their parents, the available space of their parent. But this meant that they were always left aligned. But say if you wanted like a graph or actions to be right aligned within your data cell, it wasn't supported. So now let's say you want like a chart or something, you can use PFM align right and PFM no fill. And the PFM no fill removes the flex grow property that I was talking about. So it'll always stay aligned to the right. And so as you can see here, there's way more columns that we can fit into here. So previously, as this would wrap, the action kebab here would wrap to the next line, which we didn't want. So we kind of modeled this after what we have in PatternFly 3, where this content stays within its own container and it doesn't wrap like under the checkbox, or it doesn't wrap over the kebab. So this is a controls wrapper, and you can put like a checkbox or a toggle inside of there. And then this is your content wrapper. And as the viewport shrinks, the outermost column will wrap to the next line until you get them stacked over each other like that. And then this is an actions wrapper. So you can put multiple actions inside of here. As you can see, there's 2 buttons here. But at a certain viewport, the buttons will wrap over each other like that. And then expandable is quite similar. We also have another wrapper that wraps around everything inside of this item row. And then you have your expandable content underneath. And when using an icon, the icon is part of data list content. So this is another data list cell. It just doesn't grow to the available space. And on mobile, you'll see that this flex layout turns into a grid layout so that the icon takes up this space and then the content takes up the rest of the space here. Yeah, so if you're using data list in your product, it'd be good to check this out and update it because it's quite a big breaking change. And then something else was the card demo. So this is just basic page and then cards fitting inside of it. Some changes to the actual PatternFly system were, so if you have a toolbar in your main section, the toolbar has its own padding. So we made the change, we added a modifier to the main section here to remove padding. So yeah, if you're using any component that has its own padding, you'll have to add that modifier. And then we also have a hoverable style for the card, which doesn't come by default. You have to add the modifier, but it just changes the box shadow from small to large. And then we also updated the card default text sizes. So the body will always be 14 and the header will be 16. And yeah, it's still a work in progress. We're working out whether we should provide support for like the actions wrapper up here and just like what's the header, if we could add support here. Yeah. And then another thing, so for expandable tables, prior to this, all of the arrows were just facing down, but now by default, the arrows will face to the right, and then if they're expanded, they'll face downwards. But then on mobile, by default, they'll face downwards, and then if they're expanded, they'll face upwards. And then the last thing, the website. So we now have a banner on the PatternFly 4 website to take you back to PatternFly 3. And then we have a banner on the PatternFly 3 site to take you to the PatternFly 4 site. And it's still a work in progress. So that's all for me.
Thanks so much, Christy. Any questions?
Yeah, Kendall had a question about the definition of a data list. And I know, Matt Carano, you had pulled together a really good document identifying that. I was going to see if you could share that in the chat.
Yeah, I was actually replying to that in the chat, but I see that Rachel did. But I'll just, yeah, it's basically a flexible list where you can apply any layout to the rows of the list. So it's an alternative to a table. So we're recommending use of a table when you have things that are structured and lay out neatly in a grid, but the list is really for things that you might want more flexible layout between the different rows, and you can use the data list in that case. And I think the changes that Christy made here really help to make the list a lot more useful and a lot better in a responsive mode. Does that answer your question, Kendall?
Yeah, thank you.
Great. And then Christy, we're moving on over to website work, and we're going to take a look at the banner that will help funnel folks into the new PF4 site when it launches.
Oh, I just showed the banner.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And then Gina's going to show the contribution guide for the website.
So I linked the document to the demo so you can go in and see it, but this is the contribution process that we're going to have living in, it's just going to say contribute on site, and we'll break it down for devs and designers, but this first section is for designers, and I kind of just started with use cases Stacy helped me a lot with this as well, and so did Dana and Christy. But we started with use cases and then just like getting started, first steps. This part in yellow I still have to fix, but this is like more with working with issues in PatternFly. So how you would go about creating a new issue or locating an existing issue. And then the development contribution process is for this section, and it breaks it down between core and React, which would be more specific guidelines, which I know were already written, so I didn't want to go and do that again. And then this would just be ways to contribute, kind of a description in more detail of filing a bug in that part. And then we have this flowchart that we eventually will have users hopefully be able to click on a card and it will expand into this, but we'll probably just put it in as this expanded view at first. Yeah, and it just gives you a visual representation of the life cycle itself. So it doesn't really focus on actions as much as it does on just the general cycle. Yep, and that's all.
Great. Any questions for Gina? All right, and then Joachim has a couple of updates to share on the site.
Yeah, hi. So for the website, I guess the first one is kind of a big one. We finally merged our Gatsby 2 branch into master. So you can see there's a ton of changes, and these are not all just from me. So we've had several contributors to the website effort. So we finally got that merged. And we also updated the build so that it would now combine the PatternFly 3 and PatternFly 4 builds. And that is getting pushed by Travis now to our patternfly.github.io repository. And then another update that kind of went in lockstep with this gigantic merge is the search was updated to reflect that, so that it would take in the new URLs, because now we're no longer pushing updates to the older URLs that you might have been floating around before. Now it's actually getting pushed to patternfly.org. So if you come to patternfly.org, you won't see any changes here. At least you shouldn't. It should still be PatternFly 3 content. But actually, we've got now everything under v4 in terms of the PatternFly 4 content.
It's sort of like when we're in that cube.
Titani, can you mute your microphone? Sorry. So all the PatternFly 4 content is now under /v4, and this is still a little bit of work in progress, but at least we've got it there now. So that's going to be a couple more updates over the next few days, and you'll see a banner at the top. I think Christy showed that earlier. And then for the main PatternFly website, we'll enable the banner when we're ready to basically announce to the world that we are ready to go with this. But all of this now should be here, and further updates should be continuously pushed to this directory. And the search was updated, so now all the links should be under the same domain. So that's the first thing. And then for React, I've been working on updating the wizard a bit, mainly to open it up. So that it's more configurable and it's more customizable to various use cases, and also to bring in some updates from core. So this is still a work in progress. But if I show the control wizard footer here, so first of all, the footer has been opened up, so you can actually kind of add your own functionality. You can already change the text if you wanted to, but instead of back and next, you'll see forward and backward. But you can essentially attach any click functionality you want to these buttons, either to go forward, backward within the wizard scope, or do your own thing. So for example, in this final step, actually, let me reload real quick. So in this final step, I've attached the validation now on the button press, which some users might have to do if they want to do server-side validation for their form. So if they type in a bunch of data and then they would click, this would probably say finish or next, or in this case, I'm just saying validate. If they click it, they would get a response back. In this case, validation failed. So they fix the form, they press it again. It validated fine, it goes to the next step. You can see the configuration progress screen. This is a new thing that came from core. And then once that's done, they can close the wizard. So a couple new features, mainly to open it up a little bit for the site navigation and the buttons at the bottom to kind of, so you can customize it to your own flow. And then also that finish step at the end is new. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Thanks so much, Jakob. And Katie's going to share checkbox select.
Okay. Share my screen. Ready? So I want to just quickly share the checkbox select. It's the second variant of the select. So you can see we still have the single select here. And the main difference is for checkbox select, it's a multi-select input. So you can see that you have all of your options and they all have checkboxes. You can click as many or all of them, and you'll have this little badge that appears that shows how many you actually have selected, even if it closes the menu. Keyboard navigation also works for this, so you can actually use the enter key, and one of the differences between the keyboard navigation from single and checkbox is you actually won't close the menu when you press like enter or space, so it'll behave more like a checkbox native select input for checkboxes. And I guess the last thing is, while I was doing the checkbox select input, there was a request to add groups. So this is especially nice if you have different types of filters you want to track all in one menu. So you can actually group a bunch of checkboxes under this label, which isn't selectable, it's just for display. And you can select all of them, even in different ones, and it'll reflect all of the selected checkbox inputs still up at the top. And that should be about it.
Great, thank you, Katie. Any questions on checkbox select? All right, thank you everyone for joining today. I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.